Thank you, Ann. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, January 10th, 2025. This is a special meeting of the Commissioners of City of Rehoboth Beach. We're live at City Hall Commissioners Room, second floor. I'd like to call this meeting to order at exactly 1 o'clock p.m. We'll let, in lieu of individual roll call, we'll let the record show that all commissioners are present, but for Commissioner Patrick Gossett, who's not able to be here today. I would also like the record to show that City Secretary Ann Womack is present, as is City Manager Taylor Tedder, and we excused Max Walton from these discussions about hiring another attorney in his place. So with that, want to remind everybody that I usually thank everybody that's watching virtually. We have no members of the public here with us right now, but if anybody shows up, we'll offer them the opportunity for public comment with a 3-minute limit, and we'll ask them to state their name in relationship to the city, of course. And then we'll also remind them, if they show up, that there's an additional opportunity for public comment at the end of the agenda under citizen comment, and that is for agenda or off-topic items that they can bring up, and there's the same time frame guidance on that. I am going to change the sequencing of the meeting today, and what we're going to do is we will do item B1 as the very first item of business so that we can talk in the public about the comparison of that arrangement there. And then we'll go back to executive session, and then following that, back into public session for items B1. Again, if we choose B2 and B3. So before we start, I want to remind everybody that the purpose of this special meeting is to review submissions by candidates for city solicitor position, as noted in the agenda. And before we go any further, I would like for City Manager Taylor to explain the process. Again, we've got an executive session for allowing us to interview one city solicitor type of candidate, but then we also have discussions in public session. So if you don't mind giving a quick overview of why there are two types of sessions here that we are able to use going forward.
Sure, Mayor. So back when we were discussing the city solicitor position, the Board of Commissioners decided that you wanted to look at both independent contractors, similar to what we've had before, where it's someone that's part of a law firm, and then they enter into an agreement with the city and are an independent contractor, not an employee. But the commissioners were also interested in exploring the opportunity to have someone who serves as in-house counsel, as a city employee, as our city solicitor, where they're on staff, they're salaried, and would not be billing us by the hour. So one of the exceptions under for executive sessions is that you can interview employees in executive session. So today we are going to be interviewing one applicant for the solicitor position who wishes to be an employee of the city as in-house counsel. And that's the reason why we also held an interview back in December in public session of an independent contractor, because that cannot occur in executive session. So that's kind of the difference there. Any other questions, Mayor?
No, that's fine. And so again, FOIA allows us to go into executive session, and necessarily we have to keep his name confidential. So we're not mentioning his name today.
Oh, sorry, Mayor, would Mr. Tedder or you explain why the distinction of executive
Can you
session?
sit closer to the
Sorry,
microphone?
why I'm just just to have full information, why is there a distinction of executive session for an in-house counsel candidate versus public session as we had on December 19th for an independent contractor candidate?
So that's one of the exceptions for executive sessions. You can evaluate, interview employees in executive session. You just can't do that for independent contractors.
Thank you.
And so an in-house attorney is considered an employee. All
Makes
right.
sense, thank you.
Very good. So we wanted to clarify that. Everybody okay? With that, we'll move on to our first item of business, which, as I indicated, is in public session, is B1, discuss in-house employee arrangement versus an independent contractor for city solicitor. This is our opportunity to do a comparison, if you will, if you want. And I guess I'll start off, give us an idea of what we can talk about possibly. Yeah, my goal, I think, would be to have one attorney that can do everything that we ever need. You know, our real estate questions be answered, and our zoning questions be answered, and everything that we come in front of it. And I don't think that's realistic, and it hadn't proved that way in the past, which is fine. But whether it's an in-house attorney or an independent contractor, my expectation is that they don't know everything and that they would indeed need to reach out. And obviously, if you have your own firm and you're able to reach out within your firm, then perhaps there's a cost factor there and it's a little less expensive or something. But even so, our past experience has shown that some of the attorneys still have to reach out beyond their firm, depending upon what the topic is. So I realize that an in-house versus an independent contractor is probably not a cure-all because they're probably not going to know everything and are still going to have to reach out. So what I'm looking at in my mind a little bit is trying to do a little comparison of what the annual cost might be of one versus the other. That one maybe the in-house is less of a salary than the independent contractor, and yet maybe the in-house has to reach out to other attorneys, and maybe that runs up the tab or something. I don't know, but that's one thing on my mind. I guess that's the biggest thing before me. Is there anybody else that would like to offer anything on how you're anticipating comparing?
Well, I would only add that we have had both scenarios before. You know, this isn't like something that we're unfamiliar with. You know, we had a long-standing of city solicitor, you know, back, you know, I guess maybe in the, up until maybe the early 2000s or something like that, I believe. Yeah, I'm thinking of Walt, you know.
Well, Walt Speakman, Walt Speakman was the first one. I was here 26 years ago.
Yeah.
But he was an independent contractor.
Oh,
So
okay.
he was not an employee.
Oh, he
either.
wasn't? I for some reason
Yeah,
I thought he was. Okay.
so actually the answer is no, we've never had an employee before.
All right.
So this is a new thing, and that's why I'm trying to give everybody the opportunity to offer your comparative thoughts on an in-house versus an independent contractor. And perhaps when we interview the in-house applicant, the candidate, maybe that'll help gel this conversation also on how we're going to compare the independent contractor we've already brought in and interviewed in public with today's candidate for in-house. So do you have anything you want to add? Because you might have a perspective on what I just indicated about cost figures or something. Do you have experience in in-house versus independent contractors?
Yeah, so my previous community, we did have an in-house city attorney. And I've also worked in cities where we had a similar situation like here, where we were using a contracted attorney. I do think you get a lot more work out of someone who is salaried on staff because they're working just for you all the time. You're their only client. So ultimately, I do think there are cost savings to be had. I think this would be a great question of the applicant to see their ideas on how they could generate savings on our legal bills. I also believe that this would be your employee. So you set the expectations for that employee. So if your expectation is that we save money on legal expenses, that should be collectively from the Board of Commissioners, one of their tasks to focus on.
However, Mayor,
Commissioner Saunders?
am I correct, though, that we would still need additional attorneys for things like the Planning Commission, Board of Assessment, Board of Adjustment? So this isn't a one person covers everything. This is a one person covers 80%.
Correct. So those are relatively smaller expenses. The Board of Adjustment attorney only costs the city about $20,000 a year. The Planning Commission attorney is a little bit more. I've been focused a lot on budget lately, so next year we're looking at about $160,000 a year for their attorney. But to date, this fiscal year we've spent about $690,000 in legal fees. So it's relatively a small amount when you look at all that we're spending for those other attorneys.
Would you see this in-house, if there were an in-house attorney being able to go to committee meetings and that sort of thing? We talked last week about having, perhaps reinstating some committees. And if that were the case, would you expect that the in-house attorney would sit in on those when there was something of legal consequence?
I think when there's something of legal consequence before the committees, for sure. I think another really good strategy that I've seen in the past is the city's on-staff attorney could be, maybe have it on their computer while they're in their office, and then if there is something that they need to come up and help with, they would be able to just pop in, or if they're, if a committee was getting into something that legally was maybe murky or not, in accordance to FOIA, they could just pop in.
Thank you.
But past practice generally is that attorneys don't attend any committee meetings. The ones that have authority, the commissions and the board, they certainly do. And again, if you go back and double check the job scope, I think it's fairly clear in there that what their job limitations are, that they are not, they may be participating in Board of Adjustment cases, but they're representing the Building and Licensing or the Board of Commissioners. They're not replacing the current Board of Adjustment attorney, nor are they replacing the Planning Commission attorney. So it's a good question. Good question.
Mayor?
Mayor?
Commissioner
Yeah.
Sharp.
Let Commissioner Good go.
Forgive me. Commissioner Good, Commissioner Good, and then Commissioner Thier. All right. Go ahead.
I sometimes confuse some of my own children's names, if I'm quickly trying to say, we're leaving now, whatever. I did a cursory search of nearby towns, and, there's a lot of correlation between the size of the town and whether they've chosen, the smaller towns typically, and similar to the previous candidate we interviewed on December 19th, working in places like Dagsboro, Bridgeville, they tend to have an independent contractor. Larger towns, cities obviously seem to, by and large go in-house, sometimes with multiple attorneys on staff. So I'm very open-minded. The citizens to whom I've spoken about this, and I've just focused on those who are, hold JD degrees, they are all over the map. Some think it's critical that somehow an independent contractor won't be so closely sort of under the thumb of the mayor and the city manager. That's just their opinion. But others, So I think at this point, since there's been a dearth of applicants thus far, we've interviewed one independent contractor candidate, and in a bit we'll interview a potential in-house counsel. I feel as if it might end up being driven by the caliber of the limited number of candidates. However, always trying to save the city money, since the legal fees are out of control under our current arrangement with an independent, we've had an independent contractor. This appeals to me to try an in-house counsel, because I believe maybe with benefits it would be like $200,000 a year. And that is so far below what I've seen in the budget of our legal expenses, exclusive of these separate specialized attorneys whom we've had to contract with for, projects that are, more specific or whatever, require different backgrounds. So I have a very open mind about this, and, I hope we maybe find someone perfect and decide on that basis or something, more than anything else.
Thank you. Commissioner Thayer?
Yeah, so to Commissioner Good's point, and I think Mr. Tedder, if I heard the number correctly, said we're on track to spend just about $700,000 on legal fees this year. Did I hear that correctly?
That's about what we've spent to date.
To date, okay.
So I think add another 150 to that,
So we'll be roughly at $850,000 in legal fees this year.
most likely.
Okay. So unless my memory is failing me, which it may be, that puts us, I don't know, about $350,000 over last year, because I think last year we were at 500 and change.
We were at about 542.
Okay, so I'll make two comments. So one is, to me, it just feels like we have no controls whatsoever in the spending of legal fees. And so that's first, right? And what I mean by no controls is, who's approving people to do the work, right? If a matter comes up that needs to be addressed, is there an approval process by someone within the city to say, yes, you can work on that? If there is, does that lawyer, right, whoever it is, do they say, hey, do we get from them, how many hours do you think it's going to take, right? How much do you think it's going to cost? If they exceed that, do we require them to come back and ask for more money? Do we have checkpoints along the way that what they're working on actually makes sense? My answer to that question is no, right? If there are controls, they're not being followed. There is, which gets, my follow-up point, which is, it is impossible for me to wrap my head around how a city this size can spend $850,000 on legal fees, okay? Somebody can probably do the math. From a percentage perspective, I don't know what it is, but 850, I mean, we were at 5 last year, we're going to 850. How do we get here? So I'm certainly hoping, as somebody is prepared to talk about what the roles and responsibilities of this position is going to be, whether it's an independent or in-house today, because I'm going to have a really difficult time approving anything today without understanding what the roles and responsibilities are going to be, i.e. job description. You'll just use the term job description, right? Whether it's an independent or whether it's an in-house. What are their responsibilities going to be, and how are we going to make sure, particularly if it's an independent, what are the guardrails going to be, right? What are the controls going to be to make sure we're not sitting here a year from now and we're at $1 million? Okay. One of the things that I think about a little bit here with whether it's an in-house or an independent is, we've got a planning commission, we've got a board of adjustment, we have other attorneys that the city pays for, but are really not representing the mayor and commissioners per se, right? There has to be a little bit of a wall between us, right? Because what the planning commission rules on could get appealed back to us. But there has to be controls, right? There are times where I feel like I look at what the Planning Commission, building and license, it's not just Planning Commission of Building and Licensing. I mean, these are numbers that I wrote down, and these numbers not correct because I took them off the latest projection, which I didn't want to talk about. But, it's like building and licensing has spent well over $100,000 on legal fees. On what? How? How could building and licensing spend over $100,000 on legal fees? I mean, how is that possible? I can't wrap my head around that. So I think I've said enough. I'd really like at this point to go interview the candidate. I think we're going to need to come back and discuss B1 again. Kind of as you had said, Mayor, I think, Mr. Tedder, you said the same thing. I mean, obviously I don't want to cut other people off. If other people have comments at this point, but for me, I'm ready to go interview and then come back and discuss it in more detail. So thank you.
Thank you. You have a good checklist there. I appreciate you doing that. For me, one of the unknowns is, and it might be good to do a comparison or a spreadsheet or something, is we don't know how many more lawsuits we get each year, that could cause us to go up in value or the amount of fees, and that's a tricky one.
But Mayor, if I could for a second, right? Since you've brought up lawsuits and there are 2 active lawsuits at this point, I think it's important to note that these lawsuits were the result of bad legal advice. And I don't think we need to get into more details on that here, but they were a result of bad legal advice. Which kind of comes back to why it's going to be very difficult for me to vote to approve anything today without seeing roles and responsibilities, job descriptions. How are we going to control legal fees going forward?
All right. Anybody else?
I just would like to state for the record that statement just made by Commissioner Thier is his opinion. It is not fact. To broadly say that we're in lawsuits right now because we've received bad legal advice, I think is incorrect and false, and it's an opinion.
All right, thank you.
Oh, Mayor, one follow-up, please.
Commissioner Good?
Maybe, maybe we could get a specific example here. At one point, the Planning Commission was demanding attorney and the concomitant fees for taxpayers to pay to sue the Board of Adjustment. Now, apparently, they've withdrawn that request. But, for example, what are the controls on one body demanding to sue another government body, which is just ridiculous, absurd, wasteful? Like, I almost cried when I heard about this, just this thought, because they weren't happy with one of the Board of Adjustment's decisions, granting a variance, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but if it was that variance, yeah, I was shocked and disappointed that the BOA made that decision, but I'm like, we need to move on, get these projects moving more rapidly, because every hour that Planning Commission or the city's independent contractor, whom we had, and now we're using Max Walton, is working, it's like legal fees, are approaching, I believe, about 2% of the city's budget, which, while sad, for better or worse, I've looked this up, in recent years, a lot of municipalities have spent something like 2% of their budget on legal fees. But I'd like to see that go down so we can, free up money. This is basically crowding out funds for more worthy projects, in my view. So yeah, I support Commissioner Thier in our overarching goal to get these legal fees under control.
Thank you. Susan, what we've done is we've skipped A, the executive session, and in lieu of that, we put B1. That's what we're talking about now, just so we could get that out in the open before we go in and are able to talk with. And we gave an explanation earlier on why we're able to go into executive session and keep this interview confidential per FOIA, and that's because an in-house attorney is considered an employee, and FOIA allows us to do that. So I'm going to offer you the opportunity to make any comment on B1, if you would limit it to that. And then we're going to go into executive session, most likely, if we get a motion. And then we would come back into public session at an unknown time to do B2 and 3. So would you like to offer anything? Just not right now. All righty. With that, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session, and whoever makes the motion, would you read the entirety of the agenda language there for entering into executive session?
I would make a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters in which the names, competency, and abilities of individual employees seeking the in-house city solicitor position are discussed pursuant to 29 Del C 10004B9.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Suzanne Good and a second by Commissioner Ed Chernowski to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters in which the names, competency, and abilities of individual employees seeking the in-house city solicitor position are discussed pursuant to 29 Del C, section 10,004B9. Is there any further discussion? Anybody? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, and we will be entering into executive session. I do want to give a little preface before we leave. and that is the duration of the executive session is unknown. We will not be taking any votes or action inside the executive session. We will come back into public session to continue discussion in public session and per the agenda. And if you would like us to call you or something when we don't know how long, we don't know whether it'll be 30 minutes or 2 hours. You want to give us, well, come up here and give us a phone number and we'll give it to,
I have a number,
you have her number? Okay.
I have everybody's number.
Oh, do you have her? We got your number. Okay. With that, the public session is ended and we are going into executive session. Thank you. You're welcome to also stay. Okay, you ready? It is Friday, January 10th, 2025. It is 3:38 PM. I'd like to entertain a motion to come out of executive session back into public session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Ed Chernowski and a second by Commissioner Suzanne Good to come out of executive session and back into public session. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, and we are now back in public session. We'll note that no actions were taken in executive session. Now that we are back in public session, we're going to continue with the agenda, and I'm just going to combine all three items. We are able to discuss in public session now. That would be to continue to discuss in-house employee arrangement versus an independent contractor for city solicitor if we desire to continue that discussion. We also have the opportunity per the agenda to discuss a contracted solicitor arrangement. And also, I'm hoping that we can take action today on possible consideration, which means possible vote of extending an offer of contract or employment to a city solicitor candidate and authorizing the city manager to develop employment agreement or contract and bring back to the Board of Commissioners for final consideration. With that, I'll open this to the floor. Anybody?
I'll start,
Oh,
Mayor.
yeah.
This is specifically B1, correct?
No, this is B1, 2, and 3.
Oh, okay, we're talking
If we, I'm happy to skip to B3, frankly.
Well, I'll just make a general statement that after sort of considering the options of someone having someone in-house and outside counsel, and having conducted an interview with an individual and reviewing the meeting from December 19th, where we're considering an outside counsel, I am definitely leaning to have someone in-house. I think there's a lot of value and benefit and potential cost savings and better efficiencies in that manner, and that's certainly the direction in which I'm leaning.
So what I'm hearing though is maybe you're making conclusions for item 1, where you personally are recommending an in-house employee. What I'm looking forward also per item number 3 on the agenda, B3, is are we ready to name a name to make an offer to for that in-house position? Ed?
I would certainly be ready to do that.
Mayor?
Commissioner Good?
Yeah, I agree with what Commissioner Chernowski just said. Due to, I believe, the credentials and experience of the particular in-house candidate whom we just interviewed, together with my hope that an in-house attorney will allow us to designate that person to take on all, if not most, of the Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, and Parks and Shade Tree Commission hearings, which is where we would affect these major cost savings. I have to hear from other people, but I'm ready to extend an offer, to have Mr. Tedder put together an offer of employment, because the particular candidate is really ready to start, I believe, the second week of March, and we're under a bit of a crunch here, so it just seems to be the best path forward.
Commissioner Saunders?
This morning, we heard from City Manager Tedder that our budget this year may call for somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000 for legal fees. And I think that has to be addressed. And I think looking at an in-house attorney would certainly address that. and therefore I would strongly be in favor of an in-house attorney. And the candidate that we spoke to, interviewed this morning, I think was adequately qualified, and I would have no qualms at all offering him that position.
All right, let's see if anybody else has. Commissioner Thier?
Yeah, I don't want to repeat anything that my fellow commissioner said. I think they covered many of the things that I would say. I would just say that I would concur with what was said at that end of the.
Do you have anything you want to offer?
Yeah, I would say, based on the discussion that we had with the candidate, I think this individual is qualified, and I think provides us with the an option of having an in-house, position, and addressing all the other things. I will just state that I'm not in agreement with the comment about from Commissioner Good about taking over the roles of the Planning Commission and other commissions. That's something we can address at a later date if we choose to. I don't make that a condition of this decision.
No, well, it's not on the floor
Yeah,
yet right
so-
now
So
anyhow,
I just want to be emphatic about that.
and that would be a future thing.
Yeah.
Well, we had an in-person interview with Mr. Greg Morris on December 19th, seeking, he was a candidate for independent contractor. And today we had in-person interview with a candidate for in-house attorney, city solicitor. He would be an employee of the city. They're both qualified. I also, like my colleagues, find that there are numerous benefits, I believe, that we can reap from having a in-house contractor. And so having said that, I would entertain a motion. The wording, I think, would follow B3, the motion to extend an offer of contract or employment to a city solicitor, to the city solicitor candidate interviewed today for in-house position, and authorizing city manager to develop employment agreement or contract and bring back to the Board of Commissioners for final consideration.
Can I pose a question
Yes.
before we go further? With regard to the sort of necessary things that we would be doing, where does like a background check and those kinds of things enter into the process? If you could address that.
So ultimately, typically, when I've offered jobs to people at the director level, so we'll go ahead and do initial letter, offer letter, and ultimately the employment would be contingent upon successful
there is a
pass of the background
contingency.
check, drug test, all of that things.
Okay.
And ultimately, that would also be a contingency in an employment agreement if you were moving forward with an in-house candidate, yes.
Okay, thanks.
All righty, so I would entertain a motion from somebody. Ed,
I would like to make a motion to extend an offer of contract, an employment contract to the in-house city solicitor candidate whom we interviewed this afternoon. And to authorize the city manager to develop that contract and bring it back to the Board of Commissioners for final consideration.
we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Suzanne Good and a second by Commissioner Mark Saunders to extend an offer or contract or employment to the city solicitor in-house attorney candidate, and authorizing city manager to develop employment agreement or contract and bring back to the Board of Commissioners for final consideration. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? And the motion's carried unanimously. With that, the
Mayor?
next, yes.
I just wanted to provide a little brief path forward. So our timetable, we are waiting to post the agenda for the meeting on next Friday, the 17th, until after this meeting so that we knew what the path forward was. So ultimately, what I'm going to shoot for is having that agreement ready for that meeting. And ultimately, you would be able to release that candidate's name at that point, and it'll be in the agenda packet and all of that. So,
All righty. So the next item, C on the agenda, is really just a place filler to allow us to insert the agenda item report. There was no intent there to have any discussion, really. The citizen comment, there are no members of the public here, so we're not, don't have nobody that is interested in commenting. With that, there being no further business, I'm adjourning this meeting at I just said something, that there's no members of the public here. So we're skipping over that, and with that, I want to, no further business. We're adjourning the meeting at 3:58 PM. Thank you very much. 3:48. Now turn it off, quick. Thank you all.
Thank you.